Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Aspen and PSPS COVID Task Force webinar, focusing on the impact on fellowship training. The call will begin in just a few minutes. We're going to wait to allow a few more callers to log on. Thank you for joining us. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Aspen and PSPS COVID-19 Task Force webinar, focusing on the impact on fellowship training. We are so glad you have joined us. We're going to wait just a few more moments to allow more callers to join on. We are so grateful you're here. Good evening and welcome to the Aspen and PSPS COVID-19 Task Force webinar. We are so glad you have joined us tonight. I would like to introduce our moderators, Dr. Timothy Deer and Dr. Krishnan Chakrabarti. Dr. Deer and Dr. Chakrabarti, take it away.
Michelle, thank you so much, and thank you to all of our friends around the United States and around the world who are joining us tonight. As you know, about a week ago, we came together for a very educational night, learning about the COVID-19 virus, from infectious disease, virology, and the impact on practice. And what we really found out from our members and our colleagues was the impact on education is a very important topic. I always say there's two types of paying physicians, those who are humble and those who will be humbled. And as you leave your fellowship or residency, that's going to be a very humbling time for you. So tonight we brought together a team of experts to discuss things like fellowship programs, what to expect when you leave fellowship or residency and go into a job, what the job market may look like with some of our private practice members. And then lastly, how can you even really engage in social media to find comfort and knowledge versus anxiety? With that, I'd like to introduce my co-host and co-moderator, Dr. Krishnan Chakrabarti. So Krishnan.
Thanks, Dr. Deer. You know, this is actually probably a very high anxiety time for a lot of fellows nationally, trying to figure out in preparation for the next step all the hard work that you've done. You know, we have an amazing panel of program directors today, folks from the private practice, and I think the most important part that we kind of come through with this webinar is that whatever content that you get today, we're going to try to supplement a lot of this with stuff online through our newsletter. And the end result is we're all there for you. We're accessible through phone, text, and we're rooting for you in terms of making sure that you're successful and you're part of the bigger pain family. So Tim, do you want to maybe introduce the first panel, or I can certainly introduce it and we can start getting underway with questions?
Yeah, why don't you introduce everyone, Dr. Chakrabarti, sure. And then I'll ask the first question to Dr. Moschler at that point.
Okay, absolutely. So Dr. Moschler actually is the current fellowship director at Mayo Clinic and has been really important in doing a lot of the educational forums nationally and is a tremendous mentor for folks that are trying to find their path in the pain space, for especially folks that are graduating all the way to folks that are a little bit more established. Dr. Durbalkar is from Johns Hopkins. You probably already know her through Pain Rounds, which has been an amazing resource for both medical students and fellows nationally. And she covers a lot of important content from neuromodulation all the way to things that are interventional heavy through things that we would think about in terms of pharmacology of pain medicine. Dr. Furnish, who I know extremely well because he's coming from UCSD, my home pain program. You know, one of the most, I can't tell you, every year, most fellows will undoubtedly say that the best part of the program is working with Tim. He's a incredible advocate for our fellows, and he has really helped them meander through a very tough time, a lot of the anxiety that we're going through within our program, and trying to figure out next steps. And of course, Dr. Syed needs no introduction, who's the president of Aspen and also runs a very successful pain program at University of Kansas. He is, I can tell you without a doubt that he's putting in a ton of time along with Dr. Deere to really not just look at this webinar, but in the next 3 to 6 months, as folks are really asking the question about supplementing a lot of the skill sets that may be curtailed with a shorter training time. I think they're working really hard through Aspen to generate a bunch of programs for you guys to get some of that skill set and to supplement it. So he's going to go through some of that stuff today. But I think you guys are very fortunate to have such a wonderful panel taking their time to talk to you guys. And I can tell you that they are just as excited to participate and give you some excellent feedback. So Tim, you want to ask the first set of questions, and I can.
Yeah, what a great introduction. I think that was wonderful, and it goes to show you the talent in the United States right now is so overwhelming to me. Dr. Moschler, you know, when I actually completed my fellowship, many of the procedures I do today, that was almost 3 decades ago, they weren't available, so I had to learn those procedures. And I know you in your daily life, you teach fellows how to do procedures, but there's also those ACGME really guidance on how many they should do. So there's those 2 issues. Will they be competent because they may have had their procedures cut short now that there's no elective procedures being done in many places? Will they be competent? And if not, what can we do about that going forward?
Yeah. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. The pain program directors met actually last night, virtually of course, to talk about these very things. And I know that there's a lot of angst on the side of the fellows, as well as frankly the program directors, to make sure that we are graduating fellows who are well trained and competent and who are going to provide excellent, safe patient care. So the ACGME recently came out in the setting of the COVID pandemic and made a statement regarding the stages that each area is in regards to the pandemic. And most of us are in stage 2 or 3, meaning that we have changed from business as usual, such that many of our fellows are not able to move forward in the standard way with the procedures, etc. With this knowledge, they realize that fellows are probably not going to be doing as many procedures in this last quarter. Although many of the fellows have gotten the required procedures already, if not, it's up to the programs, the program directors, and really the clinical competency committee to determine on an individual basis if each fellow has met the milestones and competency to graduate. ACGME really accredits programs, and programs themselves and program directors address competency of fellows. And really wholeheartedly, I think the fellowship directors, program directors want fellows to be doing well, to graduate safely, and we'll do what we can and need to do to get fellows to that, but many will likely graduate on time.
No, that's a great overview, and I think at the end of this webinar tonight, we'll talk about mentoring, because I think once you 4 people train those folks, if they aren't quite where they need to be, then they'll need a mentor in practice. I think that'll be very important. Which brings me to Dr. Dabakala. You know, Shravani, you and I worked together on pain boards. I was a guest on your program. It's been a great resource for many. So what role can things like pain boards serve to help improve the training for maybe something they may have missed along the way with this shortened fellowship procedurally?
Yeah, thanks, Tim, for the opportunity to be here today. Pain rounds, I think that's what you meant, is definitely a helpful resource. So neuromodulation training is, variable at best amongst institutions. And then when you lose time in fellowship, you might be looking forward to getting a few more implants towards the end of the year or whatever, and then you don't get that. But pain rounds does allow you to go through not just information regarding mechanisms and things like that, but we actually get into the cadaver lab and we film in there, and we do everything from thoracic lead placement to cervical SCS technique, and kind of show you all of the steps along the way. And then we also have some really fun segments like watch, treat, operate, where we'll show you different wounds, and it's a game, and you guys can click on your screen, watch, treat, or operate, and then find out what we would have done and why. So it's just kind of a really cool interactive program. It was actually created based on some research that we did. Susie and Tim, I think, know about this, but I surveyed the program directors in the country. 76 actually out of 106 responded, which if you guys know about, that's research. That's actually pretty good. Yeah, so that was a pretty good response rate. We also interviewed a bunch of graduating fellows and did focus groups with them. And based on all of the information we found, that's how we determined what topics should be included. So I think it's an amazing resource. It really expands your network in terms of being able to appreciate knowledge from people outside of your institution. All of our fellows are doing this, and I know I have about 160 fellows as of this morning from across the country that are doing it, and their program directors have all signed on as well. And I hope to get more.
So let me ask you one follow-up question very quickly. If I want to learn about pain rounds, how can I find out about it?
So you just simply log on to painrounds.org. If your fellowship director wants an account, I can give them a sample account so they can, look at the content, evaluate it, make sure it's something that they want to give to their fellows. You can enroll. There's an enroll button. It's really easy. It takes about 5 minutes. I'll approve it, and then you'll have access to the content.
Interesting. Yeah, I can tell you, Tim, a lot of our fellows, and I think Dr. Balkas makes up a really good point. I mean, they've always been very positive about using that as a resource. So we can certainly distribute folks on how to access that. This actually question goes to Dr. Furnish. A lot of fellows are talking about graduation timelines and certainly consideration for fellowship extensions through GME or individual programs. For those folks that don't necessarily feel that there's ample amount of time for training, depending on how long kind of the social distancing requirements go state by state, any feedback that you guys can give in terms of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I know that there's a lot of fellows who are very anxious about whether or not they're going to be able to graduate on time. I don't think that there's going to be any wholesale extending of fellowship training, but it will be, as Dr. Mosley already mentioned, on a case-by-case basis. It's the ACGME has essentially given most of the programs the authority to graduate people, even if they haven't maybe completed a particular rotation, depending upon whether or not the program and the clinical competency committee feels that they're ready to graduate. And as she mentioned, we've already had a discussion with the program directors last night. There probably will be some people that aren't maybe quite ready and might get an extension, but I don't think it's going to be a wholesale situation with most fellows.
So if programs that have those type of extension take place, does that affect folks that are residents now that are looking to start in July, in terms of the July or August for the typical programs around the country?
I don't think it will. I think most of the programs are going to be ready for a new contingent of fellows during the regular start times, because most of the fellows probably will end up graduating on time. It would be very challenging for programs to try and pay for 2 sets of fellows at the same time, and then the old fellows would be taking away procedures from new fellows, et cetera.
Interesting. This is maybe a question for both all of the panelists. So there are a lot of fellows' concerns across the country about getting reassigned to the OR ICU, or individual institutional agreements or disagreements with policies. Where do you guys take a stance on that? And I think I'm open to anyone being interested in answering that. And what recommendation would you give to fellows in terms of, somebody practicing in New York or being in the system within New York versus in California, or where Corona hasn't necessarily seen as significant a surge? I think certainly we have to be amenable and appreciating that different circumstances are faced by fellows all across the country.
Yeah, so regarding redeployment initiatives, it can be very intimidating for a lot of our fellows. If you come from an anesthesia background and you just finished residency, it may be like 8 months since you last intubated or were in the ICU managing patients. So I think the most important thing is to be transparent with fellows. So let them know ahead of time, have these discussions, let them know things as they're happening, and talk to them about the different roles and responsibilities that they might have to take on, and kind of explain to them what support will be available to them should they have to take on those responsibilities. I think it's a lot of reassurance, providing resources, and just really also saying, you know, we'll be there too. So you're not going by yourself. You know, if you're there, we're there. It's going to be an all hands on deck scenario. And a lot of that sort of reassurance definitely helps.
Tim, do you have any questions you want to add?
My question is going to be a little bit different, I think. So, you know, Dawood, you know, you've trained a lot of fellows over the years, and it's so exciting to lead fellowship and have a great job. And you're, after all these years of training, here you are. You're going to be the person, the woman, the man who's going to go out and make a difference. And now there's some uncertainty thrown in this. We're going to have a panel a little bit later with Kazra Amardelfan and Eric Lee. But the question for you is, what are you telling fellows today if they come to you with anxiety about, you know, their current job situation? What's the guidance of the fellowship directors on that issue, and what, you know, that what can they do? Because the next panel we have is going to be a couple of fellows that are actually finishing their training right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the biggest thing that most of the fellows are anxious about right now is what is this, you know, what is their practice going to look like come July 1st? I think my advice for all of them is that, you know, this is all, there's a lot of uncertainty out there. We don't really know what the world's going to look like in 2 to 3 months, but I think from everything we're seeing that we will get past this. I think the advice for them is that, you know, you went into a very strong field, you know, you're a very well qualified person to get a paying fellowship. I think that our field will still be strong. Maybe it's not going to be that strong July 1st, but come the fall time, things will be back on track, I'm hopeful. So I think just look at this as a little bit of a hiccup in your journey. I think everything, the fundamentals of, you know, pain management and where our field kind of stands is still going to be strong once we get over this COVID pandemic. So I'm trying to kind of just portray some positivity for them. They've been through internships, so a few more months of not making a paycheck shouldn't make them suffer too much.
Let me ask one follow-up question, Krishnan, and then we'll go to our next panel. And this is for anybody on the panel. So I had a private practitioner on our question box on the webinar ask a question. He's looking to hire a couple of people, but he's afraid now that they may not be qualified to do the interventions that he does in his practice. How would you recommend a private practitioner who may hire one of your fellows? How are they going to know? And maybe a very quick answer from all three of you. How would you know that the person's really qualified and safe to do interventional procedures around someone's spine?
Good question.
I can jump in there first. Well, I think, you know, I get it. I could get it where a private practice guy or gal would have some hesitancy taking a fellow from this year's class because, you know, the fellowships themselves, you know, in my personal opinion, need to be 2 years anyways. And you take a 1-year fellowship and you chop off 25 to 30% of it. There are some issues there with, you know, people being ready. But I think most fellows, when they get out, I tell them your first year out is like fellowship number 2 anyway. So I think, you know, the onus is going to be on these people that run these practices or that run these divisions and departments to really kind of step up as leaders and really foster their young junior attendings more than ever. You know, I think there's a lot of creative things you can do in this time. You know, we typically, when we onboard our fellows or new hires, is that we have them kind of piggyback with a senior attending for a month. I would say potentially, you know, you increase that timeline for 2 to 3 months right now because these are some times where potentially the fellows aren't as prepared as they normally would be come July 1st. I think there's some creative things that we all can do.
I think David is
Susan, you want to do that?
I was going to say, I think David is absolutely right on that. And in the first 2/3 of this year, I think fellows have pretty much learned the fundamentals. And as they go forward, if they don't get a whole lot more experience in the next few months, they're going to be able to apply those fundamentals and continue to polish in private practice with some mentorship.
And I would add,
okay.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I would add that the fellows in the first quarter or two had more spinal cord stims and other procedures than I had in all fellowship, you know, 10 years ago. They're very skilled. I'm very impressed at the NANS boot camp in January every year. And I think there's also a lot more opportunities in cadaver labs through societies that they can use to continue to work on those after graduation.
Ronnie, do you want to add to that before we close up?
Yeah, I just was going to say open communication. So as fellowship directors, I mean, I'm happy to talk to anybody who's trying to hire one of our fellows. And we can tell you, you know, what have they done? What have they not done? What might they need help with? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? And that might help create a strong mentoring bond in terms of, you know, taking them on into your practice.
Great. Well, this has been an amazing panel. Krishnan, you want to close the panel and start the next panel?
Yeah, I think thank you all for joining, and I just want to emphasize there were a couple points around questions related to boards, and I'm looking at some of the fellows that are on this panel tonight that are asking specific questions. I just want to say that what we'll do is we'll get our panelists here to address that, and we'll try to put out some other content for anything that we can't get to. But thank you so much. It was really helpful talking to all four of you.
Thank you all so much. You're doing a great job. Keep it up.
Yeah.
So, you know, Krishnan, I was saying recently, I thought that the fellows right now are the best I've ever seen. It's hard to get into residency. It's hard to get in fellowship. So I know there's a lot of concerns among private practitioners about hiring these fellows, but the talent level right now is the best I've seen it in 25 years. So I think that's something we should really rely on. And Susie Moschler said that quite well when Dr. Moschler said they did more in the first quarter than she did her fellowship, and I think that's accurate. So let's bring on our next three panelists.
All right. We have Dr. Hajihorn he's a brand new faculty from Mayo Clinic. He's another person who probably doesn't need any introduction. He's extremely active on social media. And in my first experience with John, actually, we had a NANS dinner event. And without a doubt, he had the most difficult mechanism of action questions in that lot. So he's extremely well-read, very talented faculty who's really making a big name for himself. Dr. Ghosh and Dr. Engel, also wonderful fellows that are about to start work, hopefully in the next 2 to 3 months. And I think Dr. Engel is going to be joining your practice, Tim. So I think we'd love to get all three of your perspectives and really kind of share your perspectives from a lot of the fellows across the country that are going through something similar to you, and really to get John to kind of reflect on newer faculty that are kind of going through this whole COVID-19 unplanned and certainly a challenging time. So
Dr. Ghosh, I'm going to start with you. I think I told you I was going to ask you about the Krebs cycle because you're still a fellow, but I'm not going to do that. So the question for you really is, what makes you feel good about finishing your fellowship now? You know, we focus on the bad, and we'll get to the bad in a moment, the worries, but what makes you feel comfortable and happy about finishing fellowship in this time of COVID? Tell me a good thing.
So, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So I think that for the last 9 months, we've been very well prepared. We've been taught from many different attendings, and we've also been given the opportunity to attend many conferences, learn from many experts. There's been so many cadaver labs. So I think we've gotten a really good overview of pain medicine. We've been trained well in different procedures. We understand the current data and the current science behind it. And so I feel kind of what Dr. Moschler said, that we have those tools and the skill set to build upon in the rest of our practice, which we would be doing whether we got the next 3 months or not. So I do feel confident about that part.
Very good. Allison, I'll ask you a little different question. So what can fellows do right now? You have a few months left. And again, I think Dr. Ghosh, you make a great point about what's positive. And Dr. Engel, I guess my question for you would be, what can you do now to finish with a good educational experience? What can a fellow do now to complete their education?
Yes, great question. So in addition to our telemedicine visits and virtual check-ins, at our institution, our fellows have actually gotten together and created a virtual pain medicine curriculum that includes peer-reviewed roundtable discussions, journal clubs, virtual journal clubs, case presentations that go over board-style questions, keyword reviews, and practice guidelines. And then we also have interventional techniques that we go over, and that's going to include Dr. Dorbakala's pain rounds, which we found to be actually it's been a great resource right now for everybody. And that's essentially a neuromodulation video series with expert interviews from people working on troubleshooting and things that you really can't learn in the book. So there's some really valuable resources out there, and we're creating this course so it can help satisfy a lot of the ACGME requirements.
So this is actually for both Allison and Priyanka. How have you guys adjusted in terms of implementing telemedicine? Has that been nerve-wracking, or has it been, are you still able to get the same amount of, I know clearly from the procedural part of it, it's very challenging because you're not able to do some of the interventions that you would be able to do traditionally, but how's telemedicine been in terms of your educational experience? And is that something that you're finding productive, and any suggestions for folks that want to try to implement that?
So I found our institution has been very helpful, and our program directors, Scott Brancolini and Dr. Emmerich, are really great in helping us navigate the system. It's been streamlined and very easily adaptable. So we haven't had any issues with the telemedicine area. And it's been actually a lot of fun seeing and working with everyone in different dimensions.
Yeah, so I would echo that. I think that actually doing telemedicine is a completely new skill set, and it's been pretty fun to work with our attendings to learn how to do that. And it's also been interesting to listen to, the Aspen webinar where Jason Pope gave a great overview on all the changes that were just made, and learning kind of this new world of telemedicine, which I think honestly after this will still continue to a large extent because it really solves a lot of access issues. And so I think it's a great skill set for us to learn, and we're pretty lucky to be able to learn that with all hands on deck on the ground right now.
So those are great answers. Dr. Hagedorn,
Yeah.
as a young faculty, people look up to you and ask you your advice. As far as procedures go, we're going to have a course down in September in Miami, really to look at DRG and spacers and the mild procedure, all the things that people may miss in fellowship now are not complete. But the real question is, if you don't have a job right now, or your job has fallen through, what type of advice could you give fellows right now, what they can do to get through this phase of transition going through? What would be some of the things they could do in your opinion?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And in talking to people around the country, it seems like there's even some people that have looked into doing consulting work, or even doing some moonlighting in their primary specialty, not necessarily pain medicine, but maybe anesthesia or PM&R, or even looking into working at emergency rooms to try to supplement what they thought was going to be their future salary or income, and trying to make up for that when the situation changes.
I might actually ask a question to John. So the other part of this, and I think a lot of fellows really would love to hear this, is, I share the belief that, and one of our senior faculty at UCSD always say this, is that first 3 years is a extended fellowship where you're kind of discovering your own skill sets and interests. What can, given that I think a lot of fellows share the sentiment that if I didn't do something in fellowship, then it's going to be harder for me to pick it up when I'm an independent practitioner or a new faculty. I think you've kind of really taken a really strong leadership in trying to learn new skill sets. So what can you tell the fellows out there today, kind of emphasizing that not everything you're going to learn in your career is going to be within that 1 year time frame, and to really reduce some of the anxiety for not getting enough training time over the course of, let's say, 12 months versus something that's much shorter?
Yeah, I mean, particularly pain medicine, things are progressing so quickly within this specialty. I think more so than any specialty out there, where we're just simply offering newer and more available technologies almost every couple of months. So there's plenty of folks that are out there in a similar situation, and I would say our industry partners are important. The organizations are important, because there's going to be, I think there will be an increased availability of labs to get involved with and learn these procedures. And I think just trying to be engaged with industry and simply reaching out to those representatives and saying that you want to learn these procedures, they're more than happy to get you that experience.
I agree, John. I think that's a great point. And I think the opportunities will be there. And I think, again, getting a mentor, if someone comes to Mayo Clinic, I'm sure you'll be a great mentor for those folks as well. Two more questions for our fellows. Dr. Engel, a lot of stress here with this pandemic, right? We're all stressed out. This weekend, I spent 48 hours avoiding the news. I just ran and read and wrote a couple papers. I didn't watch CNN or Fox or any news. It was great, I have to say. I recommend that to you. What are they doing in your fellowship programs? And this goes to yourself and Dr. Ghosh as well. What are they doing to help you with the stress? Because this is definitely the most stressful time I can recall in my life. So what types of resources do you guys have? And what would you recommend to the other fellows who are listening to this tonight?
Yeah, so some of these virtual check-ins, we've also done virtual happy hours with some of our co-fellows once a week, and they encourage us to do the working out. Some people use the Mind app they find helpful. Myself, personally, I like to work out and go for a run and row. I use the row machine. So they're very supportive of having wellness.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that our fellowships have also done a good job of staying in touch with us, seeing how we're doing virtual check-ins. Right now, the Headspace app is free to all practitioners, and I love meditation. I think it's very helpful. The other thing I've done is I just go on a lot of really long outdoor walks because it's allowed by the social distancing guidelines. And I try to look for something nice to take a picture of, and then I saw you were doing that. So it's kind of something I've been doing every day since this started, to have something pretty to remember the day by. And I think really honestly leaning on each other, like whether I talk to Allison or my co-fellows, I think we're in touch with each other and we're a great community kind of going through the exact same thing, and we can support each other through the challenges of that. And given that I'm in New York, a lot of people have asked me, like, what do you think it's going to be like for us? And so I've definitely gotten questions from a lot of my friends across the country of what are the evolving roles of fellows, given that this is the epicenter now, but maybe somewhere else soon. So I think just each other is also a great resource often.
I just want to follow up with one question to John, and I'm going to give Krishnan the last question to the two of you. But, so I love two things you both said. I love to exercise. I think it's good for our stress level. And every day I'm out running and I see a river or a creek or a deer or a tree. You got to find some beauty out there in this times of COVID, man. It's critical. So I love what you both said and so important. So Dr. Hagedorn, here's your question, and then I'm going to have Dr. Chakrabarti ask the last question to Dr. Engel and Dr. Ghosh. Your question is, give advice to Dr. Engel and Dr. Ghosh and all the fellows online. Give us a really succinct bit of advice for this next 6 months of transition. What would you recommend?
I think you need to reflect on the experiences you've already had, and you've had 6, 7, 8, 9 months of procedures at this point. And as Dr. Furnish mentioned earlier, you've got a good foundation. And these first couple of years, and I complete testament to this, and Dr. Moschler knows this, that it's completely different when you're out there on your own and you're doing these procedures for the first time without a faculty member breathing over your neck. So it was gonna be a learning experience anyways. It's certainly not going to be any easier given the current situation, but you're all going to be well trained. You're all ACGME accredited. You're going to survive this, and you're going to come out on the other side completely ready to go.
Beautiful. I think that's I don't think I have to ask any question after that. That was pretty good summary. No, I thank you guys. This panel was fantastic. I think I've spoken to each and every one of you independently, and you guys have such a strong passion for the space, and you're going to do amazing things. So I think for all the folks that are out there listening to you, you guys are truly a role model. Exemplar.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the future at all. With the three of you, I am in no way worried about the future. We're in great hands. So it makes me feel very good. So thank you for coming on tonight.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Okay.
Panel
Tim,
panel
I think
3 now. Dr. Chakrabarti,
panel 3,
Tim. About panel 3.
Oh, this is a special panel of fairly close friends. So maybe I'm going to let Dr. Deer do an introduction for both Dr. Merdelfan and Dr. Lee.
Well, I'll do my best. So Dr. Merdelfan is a leader in the space. He has been for a number of years, involved in multiple studies. Two of the things I think we can do that we haven't mentioned yet is physician visits, where physicians visit the practices of doctors. And Dr. Merdelfan has had that type of program for many years, which we call the P2P. And so it's been critical. So he's been really a leader in the field. He's on the executive board of Aspen. He's a phenomenal role model to many, and he's an ethical, good person. And then Dr. Eric Lee, who I met when he was a fellow, I believe, has been innovative in regenerative medicine, innovative in radiofrequency ablation. And Eric has been a great leader for young people, really inspiring many people, and a former Division I and NFL football player. So Eric Lee's been great in many ways, not just in medicine. So that's our two panelists. They both are involved in private practice in California, which is obviously a challenging area of COVID-19. So I think that's another great reason to have the two of you on, one in Northern California, Dr. Merdelfan, one in Southern California, Dr. Lee. So that's our introduction. Dr. Chakrabarti, you get the first question.
All right. So so tell us a little bit. I mean, I think a lot of folks out there that are, it is, a tremendously challenging time depending on size of practice, where you're practicing, and maintaining a sense of continuity given the kind of where we are with the whole COVID-19 pandemic. Do you have some advice on how do you guys really keep the financial component of your practice going through these difficult times, and then that really being a reflection of how do you guys view the hiring landscape in the next 2 to 3 months as fellows are about to graduate?
Yeah, I think those are excellent questions. And kind of the way we have to look at this, or how I look at this as a private practitioner, is this current pandemic is really in 3 phases. One is, how was your practice in terms of financial strength before this occurred? 2 is, what is going on in your practice to help mitigate the challenges we're facing today? And 3 is, how is your practice going to rebound and affect after the worst of this is over? And those kind of 3 things all really will drive your decisions as we go forward in private practice. I kind of look at financial strength as being part of the first phase of how was the practice before this got started? Was it a practice that was very, financially solvent and doing very well, or did it have close margins? And one of the biggest factors in that a lot of times is financial payments and loans. Loans, in addition to just your typical overhead and cost of doing business. When I used to practice in New York and Manhattan, there's a lot of practices there that have a high business loan debt owed because of the cost of doing business. I've been fortunate here in Southern California to grow a lot more organically, so I don't have any current financial loans there, which give me a lot more flexibility and freedom in finance. But every practice is going to be different. I mean, my practice is a much smaller boutique style practice in Southern California with 1 or 2 offices, and we have our own surgery center. But that might be very different compared to Dr. Merdelfan's up north, which is a large empire with multiple entities.
Dr. Merdelfan?
Well, thanks, Eric. I'll tell you, we've grown our practice to be a very large practice. When I started 20 years ago, and our practice was basically 2 doctors and 2 waiting room, two chairs in the waiting room and 2 exam rooms. Now we have 18 offices, over 76 physicians, and 500 employees. But with that, there's a huge burden and a level of responsibility that goes beyond just growing your own practice. So my recommendation to everybody who's on this webinar today is that to look at the amount of debt and the cash on hand in every single practice. If a practice is affiliated with a hospital, with an entity like a university system, then they're probably going to be a much safer bet for you in the long run. But if they're early, just like you said, Eric, then it may be a problem for them. For us, for example, what we have, we have a certain amount of cash in the bank. We have credit, so we know that we can continue payroll for at least 6 months if everything shuts down. So we feel safe that way. And at the same time, we're trying to grow our business from the telemedicine standpoint. We're doing wellness checks on the phone, and we're trying to figure out how we can do urine toxicology exams on our randomizer for the patients who really need it.
So let me ask you both a question that came up from a fellow online, and that is, what's the most difficult financial decision you've had to make so far in the COVID crisis? Eric, I'll start with you. What's been the most difficult decision so far you've had to make, and what do you contemplate having to make if it goes on another 3 or 4 months?
I think the most challenging decision currently is, what do you do with your staff and your overhead, right? And so the question is, currently the cash flow that is coming in from 3 to 6 months ago. So right now it's not a huge problem, but we anticipate that cash flow from any disruption we have in our practice now going down in 2 to 3 months, which actually coincides with a lot of the new hires when they come out, as most people will be hired in July through the fall. So the question is, how do you mitigate that financial loss now to set you up to prepare to go forward when you have these new hires coming in, or if you're planning to expand? So the challenges with keeping staff on the payroll, and also if you're a productivity-based practice where partners are sharing based off the number of procedures they're doing, there's been a lot of challenges with elective procedures, with how many you're doing or how many you're supposed to do or allowed to do, which then affects the income going on. So to mitigate those losses, we have to make decisions on reducing hours in terms of staff. We've fortunately been able to keep all of our staff. We've just made slight modifications in reducing hours. However, that's a tough decision that if this continues for much longer than what most people anticipate, might be a much tougher challenge. So that kind of brings up the part of like income guarantees, especially for new hires coming in. Most likely a practice that was going to hire somebody was growing at a certain pace and understood their finances pretty well. And when they make a hire, they kind of know that the initial investment is into that fellow or into that new hire, and there's not going to be a huge return just yet initially. However, if there's a guaranteed amount that's pretty high, that's something you have to consider if that volume is going to take a significant hit. And so that's really important. I like the comments you made earlier. I think communication is key between your practice you might be joining or for us on our end to the new hires we might have, because we're all in this together. Nobody's been through this pandemic before. So there's no super secret formula or rule of how to do things. As long as we communicate honestly and openly, we can be flexible and prepared to support everybody through this whole process.
I'm going to change the question a little bit, Kaz, before you get to you. And the question, I'm just changing it a little bit, and that is, if a fellow asks you, so Eric made some great points, some great concerns. So if a fellow called you tomorrow and he said, or she said, you gave me a job offer, and now I'm worried your practice may be insolvent, what information would you share? How can they ask you that question without making you mad, first of all? Because really it's none of their business until they become a partner, if you will, right? But two is, how can they ask you that in a way that won't make you angry? And what's your answer to that? And how should fellows deal with that issue?
I think it's an excellent question. And I think it's a very valid question from anybody who's going into a practice. You need to have a candid conversation. And just like everyone has said, you need to communicate with the people that you're going to work with. This is a marriage. This is a long-term type of a relationship. So from the get-go, you need to have an understanding of what's happening with the practice. Eric Lee said it best. We've never been through a pandemic, but you need to understand that whether your income guarantee is going to stay the same, even if you can't do procedures for the next few months. You need to understand if you need to pay interest on the income guarantee that you're getting. If the procedures are not available, are there other venues where you could actually make some income in that practice? So those things are incredibly important questions to ask. And I think that it's a very good question to ask somebody who's hiring you, whether the practice is going to be there or not a year down the line, mainly because of the fact that the finances may be in shambles. So that's one of the reasons why I mentioned that if a practice has been around for a long time, if they have an established referral pattern, if they're known in the community, if they've grown, if they have the financial strength, then they're more likely to be able to weather the storm and come out golden at the end of it.
So maybe I can add, go ahead. Tim, we can catch that, but maybe I can add to that part of that question too. What about skill sets? I mean, what are you guys thinking in terms of fellows who feel that there's some deficiencies and things that they couldn't have acquired in the last 3 to 4 months, not just from a perspective of the concerns financially, from a hiring perspective? Is there advice that you can give to a lot of the private practitioners, as well as your thoughts on how to supplement some of that aspect for new hirees in terms of your perspective at your practice, et cetera?
Absolutely. I think it's an excellent question. So, I finished my fellowship about 20 years ago. And in my fellowship with Elliot Crames, I did about 100 trials, about 100 implants. And when I did my first trial in my own practice, despite the fact that I had a partner who was looking over my shoulder, it took me about 3.5 hours to do that one trial. Now, so everybody needs to develop their skill set. And even to this day, I'm learning new things from the likes of Tim Deere and Krishnan Chakrabarti and Eric Lee, because we get together, we talk about our skill sets, and we try to get better and better at what we do. This is an unfortunate situation for the fellows. They may not be able to get the skill set that they need towards the tail end of their practice. But this is the time that they can be looking at key opinion leaders within the community that they're going to. They can look at mentors inside and outside the practices that they're going into in order to be able to gain that skill set. Don't be shy to ask to go into an operating room, to go and operate with somebody else for you to learn the things that you need to learn for you to be able to be independent. Most physicians, I would say 99% of the physicians would welcome you into their operating room for you to come in and for you to learn, because that's our way. Doctors have been doing this for hundreds of years, and this is the way it's going to continue. So I'm not at all concerned about the skill set of the fellows as they come out. I did a full fellowship and I still needed to develop my skill sets. And I think it's the case for all of us out there. So once they come out though, that's the time that you really need to go in and try to learn all the things that you feel like you lack. Eric, what do you think?
Real quickly, I agree generally with that comment. I think it's a big opportunity now where societies, opportunities they can look out for to get more learning and skill sets, such as the labs with Aspen or with PSPS, in Miami or in California, or other society opportunities they have to get extra time on cadavers and procedures to look at that. And also more holistically, I look at it more as an opportunity to reset, what we really are. We're healthcare providers, bottom line. It happens that our specialty is interventional pain, but this is a chance and a time for when you start with a practice, if you're not that busy, to focus on those basic elements of treating people the right way and making good decisions based on their overall health to make their lives better. And that's a great opportunity you can spend time doing, even if the volume may not be too busy when we get started.
That's great.
I just want to build on something that Kazra said, and that is, we teach each other all the time. I love what you said. For example, I've taught a lot of people DRG around the world. They didn't know how to do DRG. Now they know. I didn't know how to do ultrasound until about a year and a half ago. Tina Daly taught me, a doctor down in Virginia, came and taught me how to do ultrasound. And then I've been working on that with many people, Michael Goldfield, Samar Naruz, many people have taught me ultrasound. So I had to learn that, Kaz, you've taught me many things over the years, so we keep teaching each other new things. And I think just because you're coming out of fellowship and you may be deficient in something, doesn't mean you can't go in the OR with Eric Lee and learn how to do an RF of the knee or how to do, a cervical stimulator. So that is such a great point. I think mentoring is going to be very important for everyone in a new job. So if you don't have a mentor inside the practice, get one outside the practice. And I think everyone on this Aspen webinar, PSPA webinar, is willing to mentor you if you have an interest.
Yeah.
If we didn't care, we wouldn't be on this webinar. I think that everyone should understand that all of us have open arms, and you're welcome in any of our practices for you to learn any skill set that you need to learn.
It's been an amazing panel, gentlemen. Thank you for joining
yeah.
us. We're going to go to our last panel now, but I think your insights are very, very important.
Fantastic.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
All right. Last but not least, we have Dr. Dipin Patel and Dr. Natalie Strand, who also probably need no introduction because they're probably the trailblazers on the social media front. I'm going to start with Dr. Strand. So, in fact, I think one of our close colleagues, Dr. Erica Peterson, had pointed me over to her. I think a complete Google channel for COVID-19. And when he had first had her webinar last time, her first comment was, Dr. Strand probably is the biggest expert because she reads everything top down about this topic. And, I think, I get a chance to look at all of her posts and they're very meaningful. And for a lot of folks that are using social media as an outlet to distill good quality information, she's a great resource. And then Dr. Patel was, clearly another trailblazer on the social media front, has done a lot with education of fellows, good curated content, and he's been a big part of us trying to get a lot more information out. So I can tell you, Tim has gotten, Dr. Deere himself has gotten really good at putting out wonderful content, and a lot of us are still trying to figure out how he learned it, probably better than some of us that are of the 30 plus, 40 plus age group. And so I think all three of them can tell you that, sharing with you how impactful social media has become in the last 5 to 10 years in terms of incredible way to dispense good information, good quality information. So I'm really excited for this last panel in terms of what their input is for fellows that are looking for new and resourceful and innovative ways to learn and educate themselves on the side of pain, not just being able from the traditional standpoint. So I guess, Tim, do you want to ask the first question and I can follow up?
Sure. So Dr. Strand, I guess the real question is, as a fellow, I think there's a two-part question here. One is, what can they take away from social media that would be valuable to them? And what can they give back to social media that will be valuable to our specialty? And those are very broad questions, but I think you're uniquely qualified to answer those.
That's an excellent question. As far as what they can take away, there are really so many valuable things to take away, especially in this space where a lot of us, aren't in our home institution anymore and we're not learning in the same way. So, certainly self-directed learning, but I think social media is really great because you have immediate access to experts in the field. You'll find people that will answer you on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, those kinds of mediums within minutes. Experts who were writing the articles that you're reading. So access to information, self-directed learning is really critical. And it's also another fantastic way to network, certainly, in societies and societies channels with social media, but even directly with people who are doing what you want to do, who are doing the skills and operations that you want to learn, who are leading the societies that you want to be a part of, using social media to network and create those relationships really do have lasting effects and opening opportunities. Lastly, I think opportunities for research and publishing. If you have an interest in something, reaching out via social media has been very fruitful for many people who want to, again, connect with mentors, publish in certain spaces. So I think what fellows can take from social media is it's vast, and I'm just kind of touching the surface with what I'm mentioning. And as far as what they can give back, I think the most important thing is to be responsible, especially as you get more followers. It's tempting to be sort of salacious or alarmist or, put out something that's just going to get a lot of attention because it's shocking. But, always remember that we are professionals, and whether you're in your office or you're on social media, I think we all have a professional responsibility to inspire trust with the people that are following our information. So if you are going to share data, try to make sure it's sourced from an accurate source. Be a positive resource for others, and then just kind of remember to keep it professional. And someone once told me, if you wouldn't wear it on a T-shirt, don't send it out in a tweet. And I think that's some pretty good advice.
I love what you said, Natalie. I always tell my children, if you put a bumper sticker in your car during an election, 51% of the people are going to hate you, or 49% of the people are going to hate you. So I think it's good to keep it informational, educational, and as positive as you can. And that's great. I love that insight you gave, because you're very educational in what you do. And I love that. Dr. Patel, you became on our executive board in charge of all of our social media at Aspen because your talent is amazing. Your interventional pain physicians work certainly has taught me so much. You do polls to learn what people are doing. You take these inquiries that really let us know if I'm right or you're right or someone else is right about a technique as far as people's opinion. Give us insights on what you've done in the field of social media, and what, if I'm a fellow today, what can I do to enhance my appearance on social media and really help enhance everyone else?
Thanks, Tim. I think that from the start, in respect to just linking fellowship education and the transition to becoming an attending with utilizing the digital space, the first thing that I would recommend is just proactively produce and start consuming your own content. And there's never a stage where it's too late. You can never be too soon. You can never be too late. And the important thing is that's like a nice documentation in terms of enriching your fellowship learning, because you need to use the digital space as a vector. One of the reasons why is to not only just support cross collaboration amongst co-fellows, attendings, mentors, and even future colleagues, but also to grow their own network, right? A lot of the relationships that we have all made professionally have developed into friendships as a result of our interactions in the digital space. And that's also led to increased amount of collaboration in our space, which has expedited the amount of research that we've been able to publish, the amount of education that we've been able to basically create for fellowship education, and also their transition during this pandemic. So in terms of that, take the leap, start utilizing the digital space, social media as one of your resources to, and start as soon as possible, because with that, like for example, with abstracts, case reports, all of those things are like your digital library of work that you've accomplished, work that you've done. People will see that. People take notice, right? When you put out a major landmark paper, it circulates so quickly and it gets into the hands of fellow pain physicians around the world within minutes, and that positively impacts our patients, and it positively impacts us as physicians and our growth. And I think that the main thing that I wanted to highlight is just the fact that, as a society, Aspen has taken the leap to kind of rapidly contribute some resources, time, effort, and money into digitalizing ourselves as a society, and trying to get ahead of the curve and stay ahead of the curve. The way that we've been able to launch our COVID-19 task force. Krish, you did a fantastic job leading that, and all of us as panelists tonight have contributed to that in one way, shape, or form, and we're going to continue to do so. So these webcasts, we were the original content creators of performing these, and now, it's become spread like wildfire. So being innovators and leaders in that space just goes to show, the time of effort that we're putting towards enriching education. And by the way, a copy of, the recording for tonight will be made available to all the fellows or all the physicians around the world that want to tune in and review it in case they miss something. And then also our newsletter launch, right? We kicked off our newsletter. We emailed out to our 1,700 registrants from the first webinar, and the few hundred that we had for this webinar. The newsletter in PDF form will serve as a good first resource in terms of how to battle the pandemic. So, without the digital space, we wouldn't be able to do these things. The Q&As that we're getting in live as we speak right now, they may not get answered on this 1 hour platform that we have tonight, but the follow-up that we have, between the leadership and the COVID-19 task force, we're going to answer all those Q&As and get those out in a fancy newsletter form for you to kind of digest and use as a resource. And then the other thing, we're going to get it onto the website. So you'll have resources on the website to help navigate not only the difficulties you may be facing implementing telemedicine or reservations that you may have, but in terms of the coding, the reimbursement, some of the insights that you're getting from private practice doctors. Like this is valuable stuff that's going to serve you well, and we want to be able to make sure that we continue to use our resources to help get those to our members and get those to the fellows that need them. And then in terms of just following the social media accounts that we've already built up, that's our main source of transmission. We talk all the time when we're planning and organizing, how much email clutter that we have, just planning and organizing one webinar, right? And we probably get hundreds of emails. And the way that we announce it in the digital space is the way for you to get information the fastest. Like for example, in terms of what we're doing as a society, we announce all of our major cadaver labs, our conferences, our award recipients on our social media, and I think that that's important because a lot of people kind of like to just passively consume the content quickly and efficiently without having to take too much time away from their daily life, because we live kind of almost in like an ADD time where everyone is just kind of like, all right, a couple seconds here of attention span here, but you're still passively consuming content, and you're passively consuming that there is an event coming up. So that's one way that we've been able to kind of tailor towards our members and the way that society is shifting and we as people are shifting. So in terms of the fellowship educational announcements, look forward to that. The launch of our mentorship program and advanced cadaver labs that we're going to hold shortly after the completion of your fellowships. Dawood, our president, will touch on that later. Those are going to serve you well during your early development as young attending physicians. And I think that these programs that we're all spending time to kind of help curate for you digitally and in person will help alleviate any stress and anxiety that you may have related to any downstream effect of the pandemic in terms of your state of preparation.
That was a great answer, and certainly so comprehensive. And I think if when people go back and replay this, you answered kind of a strategy for a society, for a person, for everyone. I want to ask one last question of this panel. We're gonna have closing remarks, and that's to Dr. Strand. Dr. Strand, you know, I know you were actually the greatest race. You won the greatest race. Is that what it's called? I believe.
The
on
Amazing
CBS?
Race. Yeah.
The Amazing Race. I mean, you've had so much personal success. One of our attendees asked, you know, when you do social media, do you separate the social and the professional? Do you make one account with some models? How do you keep the message out there? What's your answer to that? And then we'll wrap this panel up and have closing remarks.
You know, I really have tried to kind of keep it separate. For example, my Instagram account is private. And so I know we're Instagram friends, most people on here, but, you know, if I've met you and I trust you seeing a picture of my child, if I think you'd be interested in seeing what I did on a Saturday morning, you know, that's kind of where I post that content. And for me, my Twitter account, which has a lot more followers, I keep that more professional. So, you know, it's not all research articles or anything like that, but it is, you know, sort of my professional persona. So I would recommend keeping them separate. Not that you can't have overlap with people, obviously, that you are friends with within your specialty or within the field of medicine. But I do think that, you know, you have to be authentic, you have to be yourself, but it does create a mixed message on what people come for. People, if they kind of identify with your brand and they know that if you follow me, you're going to hear about pain medicine or COVID or gender bias issues, and that's sort of what they follow you for. Having type 1 diabetes, you know, a long time people followed me for type 1 diabetes. There's not a huge crossover there. So I think the more, you know, you're authentic to what you're trying to deliver, the more on brand you are, the more people will follow you because they know what they're going to get, and they know they're going to get what they came for initially. So I do think that it's wise to separate from a professional standpoint. And I also think just from privacy issues, you know, I mean, what I want to share with my friends, you know, is not the same thing I want to share with thousands of people, you know, and I don't know what's going to happen to that kind of picture or quote. So I do recommend keeping it separate.
Very good. Dr. Chakrabarti, final thoughts on this panel?
Yeah, you know, it was interesting. I'll share a little anecdote. 2-3 days ago, I was texting a bunch of my co-fellows about the whole story about the New York doctor that was putting out this concept of 750 patients on hydrochloroquine and azithromycin. And what the power of social media was it beautifully explained in that he put that out on Twitter. And just today, a New York Times article had talked about how that concept has gotten all the way to the White House. So meaning, you know, I think a lot of us today and in this panel and all those folks across the country that are listening to this, you know, it's really important to understand that stuff that you put out there can have a tremendous impact, and to have the responsibility to curate that and to, you know, I think you guys have done an amazing job there. I think folks all over the country look to you guys for advice and things of that sort. So it's really awesome to hear from all three of you on how impactful this is. I think this is the future.
Thank you all very much. We're going to go to Dr. Dawood Syed now for a final announcement before I close. So Dawood.
Thanks very much, Tim. And I think, you know, I'd like to thank all the panelists who donated their very valuable time away from their families and their practices in this very crazy time right now. But I want to just share with you a few of the things that were alluded to during the webinar today. And, you know, in all honesty, a lot of these things Aspen was dedicated to these initiatives already. This current pandemic has only really emboldened us and accelerated our emphasis on a lot of these initiatives. You know, we really pride ourselves on a society that really wants to mentor the new generation of interventional pain physicians. So a few of the things that we really are going to make a big emphasis on over the next few months is free membership for all current pain fellows and all incoming fellows. We also would like to extend that to the program directors and associate program directors as well. And that free membership will also then parlay into free attendance at our annual meeting, which has been now rescheduled to September. Also, the Aspen Mentorship Program has been something that's been in the works for several months, but again, we hope to accelerate that as well. That is a charge that's being initiated by several high-profile people in our field, Dr. Jonathan Carlson and Erica Peterson, will be kind of leading that mentorship program. So really, we think this is going to be very important in the coming months. So fellows or junior faculty are interested in participating in this, please forward those interests onto Aspen at aspenpain.com, and we'll try to pair you up with a lot of our, really renowned mentors that are really just willing to kind of donate their time and vast knowledge. We're going to continue to push out more Aspen educational webinars. We have a series of webinars that we're going to unveil over the next several weeks focused on advanced spinal cord stimulation, intrathecal pump management, peripheral nerve stimulation, spinal stenosis and sacroiliac joint disease, and a lot of the new, interesting, and innovative technologies at addressing those types of disease entities. Again, those will be announced here within the next several days. And then again, I think one of our really special thing that we have planned, which I think is going to be even more important than ever, was our Aspen Graduating Fellows course. So this is a course, if people were involved or knew about our advanced course that we did last December, where we really focused on some of the new and innovative technologies, things like intraspinal spacers, advanced spinal cord stimulation, minimally invasive lumbar decompression, minimally invasive fusion techniques, amongst several other techniques. But this will really be geared, and our pledge is that, space will be limited for this, but being what's happened with this year's fellows, we're going to give all priority to the current fellows this year. They're going to get the first crack at filling up this course. I think we can accommodate up to about 125 to 150 fellows. If the interest is more than that, you have my pledge that we'll try to make further accommodations, but we really want to dedicate this course to this year's fellows, and that'll be occurring September 20th on the tail end of the annual meeting in Miami. With that, I'll give it over to our chairman, Dr. Tim Deere.
Oh, that's amazing. Great discussion. And for those of fellowship, if you want to sign up for a cadaver course in September, we're going to hopefully that's going to be a great tool for you. I just want to close with a final thought, and that is, you're going to be okay. I know it's stressful. I know it's a strange time to come out of your fellowship, but good people do well, and good people will continue to do well. You're going to be great doctors. It's very competitive to get in your fellowship. You've been trained at a certified place around the country. And when you come out, patients are going to need you. There's going to be a pent-up demand of patients who've been at home, who have been suffering, and they're going to need your skills. So please just find some comfort in knowing it's going to be okay. And we're going to be here for you. We're going to mentor you. We're going to help you any way we can, because we care about the field, and we want the field to advance. With that, I wish you all the best of weeks. I wish you safety, and I wish you great health. And God bless you all. Thank you for attending our webinar tonight. And with that, have a great night.